Welcome to 221B Stories, where every story invites you into a world of secrets and surprises. Grab your coffee, stay curious, and share the thrill with fellow mystery lovers. Let's get started, Sherlock Holmes and the Veil of Forgotten. Echoes. Chapter 1. The letter arrived on a morning drenched in a thick London fog, the kind that swallowed carriages whole and reduced even the familiar streets to shadowy voids. Dr. John Watson, having just poured his tea, paused at the unfamiliar seal pressed into the wax, an emblem of a raven perched upon a twisted branch. Curiosity piqued, he sliced it open, reading words that seemed soaked with dread. Echoes fill the halls. Names once buried now whispered in the dark. Come before the manor remembers too much. E.B. Holmes glanced up from his violin, eyebrow arching. Interesting choice of words, Watson. A manor that remembers? Surely this warrants investigation. His eyes, always sharp, but now glinting with a peculiar excitement, fixed on the letter. Pack your bag. Dartmoor holds our stage, and Blackthorn Manor our audience. The journey west was swallowed by silence, broken only by the rhythmic clatter of train wheels echoing through the dense mist. Arriving at the station, a carriage awaited, drawn by two black horses whose breath plumed in the chill air. The driver, face lined with worry, muttered, "Best you not stay too long. That place, it remembers things it shouldn't." The path to Blackthorn Manor twisted through skeletal trees, branches clawing at the carriage like grasping fingers. At last, the estate emerged, a sprawling Gothic structure, its stone façade weathered, windows glinting like watchful eyes. Fog clung to its foundations, seeping through the grounds as if the earth itself exhaled secrets. At the grand entrance, Lady Evelyn Blackthorn stood waiting, her posture regal, but eyes shadowed with something between fear and fatigue. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she greeted, voice a soft echo itself. "Thank you for coming. The incidents have worsened. We hear voices where none should be. My brother claims madness, but I know the manor is trying to speak. To remember." Holmes nodded. "We shall let facts, not fancies, guide us. If you would show us to the source?" Inside, the manor swallowed sound. Even footsteps seemed hesitant upon the aged wooden floors. Portraits lined the corridor, eyes following intruders with painted suspicion. Evelyn led them to the main hall, where a vast chandelier swayed gently despite the still air. "Listen," she whispered. Silence stretched thin. Then, faintly, a voice. Hollow, distant. It mirrored Holmes's earlier words. "We shall let facts, not fancies, guide us." Watson's skin prickled. Echo or trickery? Holmes crouched, studying the walls. No visible source, no concealed wires. Yet the voice lingered, reverberating beyond logic. They were shown to their quarters. Watson noted the way the candlelight quivered, shadows dancing across aged wallpaper patterned with twisting vines. Sleep, however, proved elusive. Just past midnight. A soft knock echoed through his room. Not at the door, but within the walls themselves. Rising, he pressed his ear to the plaster. Breathing. Slow, deliberate. Not his own. Morning light, weak and gray, brought little comfort. Over breakfast, Holmes announced, "The manor is old, its walls thick with secrets." Echoes, Lady Evelyn? Perhaps. Or perhaps someone wishes you to believe in ghosts. Fear clouds. Judgment. He tapped the table. "We shall dissect this mystery layer by layer. Begin with the staff. Fear breeds stories. Facts breed solutions. Exploring the manor revealed more than architectural curiosities. A missing key from the music room door, scuffed floorboards leading to the library, where dust patterns suggested recent disturbance. Holmes knelt beside a shelf, fingertips grazing a hidden latch. A section of the bookcase creaked open, revealing a narrow stair descending into darkness. Watson fetched a lantern. Its flickering glow painted the walls with wavering shadows. The air grew colder with each step, damp stone seeping through their boots. At the base, a door stood ajar. Holmes entered first. The room beyond held relics, old trunks, decaying furniture, and on a rotting desk, a leather-bound journal. Holmes flipped it open, pages brittle but words legible. Sept 14th, 1864, he read. Experiments continue. Memory is but an echo, and I shall command it to speak. They call me mad, but the manor remembers. It always remembers. Watson frowned. Madness or something darker? Holmes closed the journal. Answers, Watson. Layered beneath superstition lies intent. Someone benefits from this hysteria. The question is, who? And why now? As they ascended back into the main hall, the chandelier overhead shivered. Not from wind, from something else. And in that fleeting moment, Holmes glanced toward the way. Portraits. One, previously facing forward, now angled downward, as if bowing to an unseen truth lurking just out of reach. Before moving to the next chapter, let us know where you are watching from. And if you love stories like this, subscribe to the channel. Because tomorrow, we have another incredible story waiting for you. Chapter 2. Lady Evelyn led Holmes and Watson through the sprawling corridors of Blackthorn Manor, her footsteps echoing softly against the aged wooden floors. The air hung thick with a lingering chill, carrying with it the faint scent of damp stone and extinguished candles. Shadows clung to the high ceilings, stretching like dark fingers along the walls, occasionally interrupted by the flickering glow of antique sconces. The portraits continued their silent vigil, each set of painted eyes seeming to scrutinize the visitors with unsettling familiarity. They entered the drawing room, where the other occupants awaited. Holmes's gaze swept over the gathering with keen calculation, noting the subtle body language and unspoken tensions that filled the space like smoke. Each face presented a mask of composure, yet beneath lay undercurrents of suspicion, fear, and something more elusive, guilt. "Allow me to introduce you to the household," Lady Evelyn began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "My brother, Lord Reginald Blackthorn." Reginald stood by the fireplace, nursing a glass of brandy. He was a man in his early 40s, sharp-featured with piercing blue eyes that mirrored his sister's but lacked her warmth. His lips curled into a half-smirk as he regarded Holmes. "So, you're the famous detective come to exorcise our phantoms. I trust you'll find a rational explanation for this nonsense?" Holmes inclined his head. "Superstition often thrives where reason has yet to tread, Lord Blackthorn. I intend to illuminate the shadows with fact." Reginald chuckled darkly. "Good luck with that. This house has a mind of its own, and if you ask me, Evelyn's been reading too many ghost stories." Lady Evelyn's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Holmes turned his attention to the next figure, a young woman standing near the window, her hands clasped tightly before her. She wore a modest dress, her dark hair pulled back into a severe bun. Her eyes, however, betrayed a deep sadness that seemed to permeate her entire being. "This is Miss Clara Fenwick, my children's governess," Evelyn introduced. "She has been with us for several years." Holmes approached Clara gently. "Miss Fenwick, you've experienced these Occurrences? First-hand? Clara hesitated, glancing toward Reginald as if seeking permission to speak. When none was given, she lowered her gaze. Yes, Mr. Holmes. On several occasions, I've heard voices late at night, whispering my name. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but it feels so real. Sometimes I find things moved. Items I know I left in one place appear elsewhere. Fear has a curious way of reshaping reality, Holmes murmured, but we shall not rely on feelings alone. His gaze shifted to the last member of the room, a man seated at a side table, meticulously polishing a pocket watch. His tailored suit and polished demeanor spoke of professionalism, yet there was a guardedness in his posture. Mr. Albert Crow, Evelyn said, our family solicitor. Crow stood and offered a curt nod. Mr. Holmes, I assure you, my interests lie solely in the well-being of the Blackthorn estate. These disturbances, while troubling, should not overshadow the practical matters at hand. Lady Evelyn has been considering selling the manor. Perhaps these ghosts are a manifestation of reluctance to let go of the past. Holmes's eyes narrowed slightly. And do you stand to gain from such a sale, Mr. Crow? Crow's smile was tight. I gain only what my profession warrants. A modest commission for facilitating any legal transactions. Suggesting otherwise would be unfounded. Reginald scoffed. Crow's got a vested interest, Holmes. The estate's valuable, sits on land rich with minerals. A tidy sum for all involved if we sell. Evelyn's face paled. Reginald, you know why I've hesitated. This is our family home. Memories linger here. Not all of them pleasant, but it's more than just stone and timber. A home? Reginald shot back. It's a mausoleum of past sins. Better to let it crumble or profit from its remains. The tension in the room thickened, each word a blade drawn in an unseen duel. Holmes allowed the silence to stretch before interjecting. It seems the manor is not the only source of discord here. Human motives often cloud perception as much as any spectral tale. Clara's voice broke the tension. Last night, I thought I saw someone. In the West Wing. I followed, but they disappeared. The door to that wing has been locked for years. Evelyn frowned. That's impossible. No one has keys to that section. It was sealed after the accident. Holmes's gaze sharpened. Accident? Reginald drained his glass and set it down with a clink. Our father's demise. Fell from the balcony in the West Wing. Tragic, yes, but hardly a mystery. He was a drunk and a tyrant. Holmes's mind whirred. A death, locked rooms, whispers. From the past, it painted a canvas ripe with layers. I would like to examine that wing, he said. Access, however, seems to be an obstacle. Evelyn hesitated, then turned to Crow. Fetch the keys, Crow's jaw clenched. They're kept in my office. I'll retrieve them after lunch. Holmes's smile was thin. Promptness is appreciated, Mr. Crow. Time, I fear, may not be a luxury we possess. As the household dispersed, Watson leaned close. What do you make of them? Motives abound, Holmes replied softly. Greed, grief, guilt. The 3 G's often dance together. Reginald seeks profit. Crow masks something beneath his polished exterior, and Miss Fenwick, he paused. She harbors a sorrow deeper than mere fear. And Lady Evelyn? She walks a line between preservation and revelation. There are secrets she guards, Whether to protect herself or others remains to be seen. They took a walk through the grounds while awaiting Crow's return. The fog had thickened, wrapping the manor in a shroud of gray. Watson glanced toward the west wing, its windows dark, curtains drawn like closed eyelids. Somewhere within, the answers lay hidden. Back inside, the staff gathered in the kitchen offered little clarity. Rumors abounded. Voices in the halls, cold spots, objects vanishing. One maid swore she saw a figure pass through a locked door. Another claimed to hear crying in the walls. Superstition had taken root, nourished by fear and neglect. Crow returned at last, keys jingling ominously. "Shall we, then?" he said, voice betraying a note of reluctance. They ascended the grand staircase, each step creaking beneath their weight. At the end of the corridor, Crow inserted the key into an ornate door. It groaned open, exhaling stale air thick with dust and disuse. Holmes stepped inside first, lantern raised. The west wing was a mausoleum of forgotten time. Faded tapestries, furniture draped in white sheets like specters awaiting resurrection. The floorboards groaned beneath their feet, echoing through the empty chambers. Holmes's keen eyes noted subtle details. A layer of dust disturbed. Footprints leading toward the balcony where the elder Blackthorn had met his end. Approaching the edge, Holmes peered over. Below lay the overgrown courtyard. A fall from here would be fatal, he remarked. But was it an accident or something more deliberate? Watson found himself shivering despite the absence of wind. "Holmes, do you believe these voices are human?" "Everything has an origin, Watson. Whether natural or fabricated, we shall uncover it." He paused, fingers tracing a faint scratch along the balcony railing. Someone was here recently. Clara's earlier claim resurfaced in Watson's mind. The figure she saw, or someone she was meant to see. Holmes's gaze darkened. Illusion, Watson, can be as potent as reality when wielded by the right hand. As they descended, a soft sound reached their ears, a whisper. Faint, barely perceptible, yet unmistakably real. "Leave," it breathed. Watson glanced at Holmes. That wasn't an echo. Holmes's lips pressed into a thin line. "No, Watson. That was something far more deliberate." The house seemed to close in around them, shadows deepening, secrets stirring, and somewhere in the depths of Blackthorn Manor, a truth waited, a truth that would not remain buried for long. Chapter 3. The oppressive air inside Blackthorn Manor seemed to grow thicker with each passing hour, as if the very walls were drawing breath and holding it in anticipation. Holmes moved with a purpose, his keen eyes absorbing every detail. The west wing, now unlocked, was proving to be a labyrinth of forgotten chambers and concealed passageways, each one steeped in decay and memories best left untouched. Watson trailed behind, lantern in hand, the flickering light casting dancing shadows along the walls. His gaze lingered on the faded wallpaper, once vibrant, but now peeling away to reveal the cold stone beneath. There was a melancholy here that seeped into the bones, a quiet mourning that spoke of time, loss, and things unspoken. Holmes paused at an ornate mirror, its glass fractured with age. His fingers traced the cracks, eyes narrowing. "Mirrors, Watson," he murmured, "are curious things. They show us what we expect to see, and sometimes what we don't." Watson's reply was cut short by the sound of footsteps echoing in the corridor behind them. Both men turned sharply, but the passageway stood empty. Holmes's gaze remained fixed on the darkness. "We are being watched," he said softly. "The question is, by whom?" Their exploration led them to a door half-concealed behind a tapestry depicting a hunting scene. Holmes pulled the fabric aside and examined the door's frame. "Recently disturbed," he noted. "See the dust displaced here? Someone's used this passage not long ago." Producing a set of slender tools from his pocket, he deftly picked the lock. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Watson hesitated. "You're certain about this?" Holmes offered a faint smile. "Certainty is a luxury, my dear Watson. Curiosity, however, is a necessity." With that, they descended. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of damp earth and mildew. Their lanterns illuminated rough-hewn stone walls, the narrow passage barely wide enough for them to pass. Watson's pulse quickened as the weight of centuries pressed down upon them. At the base of the stairs, the tunnel branched into two paths. Holmes crouched, studying the ground. Footprints, two sets. One heavier, likely Reginald's. The other lighter, perhaps Miss Fenwick's. Yet they diverge here. "Which way?" Watson asked. Holmes considered. "The heavier prints lead left, but there's a certain deliberation in the right path. We follow that." The chosen path wound deeper beneath the manor, walls damp with condensation. At length, they reached a chamber carved into the rock. Inside stood a heavy oak desk, its surface covered in dust, save for a single cleared space where a leather-bound journal lay open. Holmes's eyes gleamed as he picked it up. "The handwriting matches what we found earlier," he observed. He began to read aloud. "March 3rd, 1865. The echoes grow stronger. Memory is not confined to flesh. It lingers in stone, in wood. The manor remembers. I have discovered a way to harness it, to make the past speak." Holmes paused, frowning. Madness? Or something more? Watson's gaze drifted to the shelves lining the chamber, filled with vials of discolored liquids and peculiar devices whose purposes he could not fathom. What in heaven's name was he doing down here? "Experimenting," Holmes replied. "Not with chemicals alone, but with perception. Creating an environment where suggestion becomes reality. If one believes a place is haunted, it doesn't take much to make them hear ghosts." A sudden clang echoed from deeper within the tunnel, sharp and metallic. Both men stiffened. Holmes extinguished the lantern's light, plunging them into darkness, save for the faintest glow from the distant entrance. Footsteps approached. Slow, deliberate. Watson's hand went to his pocket, fingers closing around the comforting weight of his revolver. Holmes motioned for silence. The footsteps halted just beyond the entrance to the chamber. There was a pause. Then the sound of retreating steps, quicker now, fading into the darkness. Holmes relit the lantern. "Someone doesn't wish us to find what lies further." "Which means we must," Watson said grimly. They pressed on, the tunnel narrowing until they emerged into another chamber. Larger, with walls lined by shelves cluttered with relics, old letters, photographs in cracked frames, ledgers detailing generations of the Blackthorn lineage. In the center stood a weathered trunk. Holmes knelt and, after a brief examination, pried it open. Inside were documents sealed with the Blackthorn crest. Holmes's gaze darkened as he read through them. Well, well, financial records, payments to silence certain indiscretions. The Blackthorns have long skeletons in their closet. Watson peered over his shoulder. Blackmail? Worse. Bribes to cover up illegal experiments. Look here. References to subject memory manipulation. It appears Lady Evelyn's father believed he could induce selective amnesia, erasing inconvenient truths. "Dear God," Watson whispered. "Why?" Holmes's expression was grim. "Power, Watson. Control. If one can make others forget, one can reshape reality itself." Their examination was interrupted by a faint, rhythmic tapping echoing through the chamber. 3 knocks, evenly spaced. Holmes stood, gaze sweeping the room. "Morse code," he said. "Dot, dash, dot, R. Someone is sending a message." "From where?" Watson asked. Holmes's gaze lifted to the ceiling. "Above us. There's another level. Directly, beneath the main hall. A hidden mechanism in the floor revealed yet another passage. As they ascended, the tapping grew louder until they emerged beneath a trap door. Holmes pushed it open, revealing a concealed alcove off the main hall. Stepping out, they found themselves face to face with Miss Fenwick, her face drained of color. I was looking for you," she stammered. "Were you?" Holmes's gaze was unyielding. "Or were you ensuring we found what you intended?" Clara's composure shattered. Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't want anyone hurt," she whispered. "But some truths must come to light." Holmes's voice softened. "Truths like what, Miss Fenwick?" She hesitated, then drew a small photograph from her pocket. Faded, edges worn. It showed a young boy, smiling, standing beside a man in a lab coat. "My brother," she said. "He was one of the subjects, part of their experiments. They said it was for science. He started forgetting things, then himself. One day he wandered into the woods and never came back." Watson felt a pang of sympathy. "Why not go to the authorities?" "They buried it," she said bitterly. "Money, influence. No one cared. The manor remembers what they tried to erase." Holmes was silent for a moment. "And the voices?" "I found the tunnels, the devices. I used them to make them listen, to force the past into the present." Holmes's expression was unreadable. "A dangerous game, Miss Fenwick." "I didn't hurt anyone," she insisted. "I just wanted them to face what they did." Holmes sighed. "Intent and consequence often diverge. You've stirred a hornet's nest. Reginald, Crow, they won't take this lightly." Miss Fenwick's gaze hardened. "Good. They shouldn't." Holmes turned to Watson. "We have motives now. Grief, guilt, greed. The pieces align, but the picture remains incomplete." Watson nodded. "What's next?" Holmes's eyes gleamed. "We set a trap. Those responsible will reveal themselves soon enough. Fear of exposure is a potent motivator." Outside, the manor loomed under the gathering dusk, its silhouette jagged against the darkening sky. Secrets had begun to surface, but with them came danger, and Blackthorn Manor was not yet done whispering its truths. Chapter 4 Night descended upon Blackthorn Manor with an unsettling weight, draping the estate in a darkness that seemed to breathe and shift. The fog thickened outside, pressing against the windows like a living thing eager to seep in. Within those aged walls, silence was no longer a comfort. It was an omen. Holmes, ever methodical, had laid the groundwork for his plan. He had spoken little after their confrontation with Miss Fenwick, his mind churning through every detail, every inconsistency. Watson could see it in the way his fingers steepled beneath his chin, his gaze distant, yet razor-focused. The household gathered in the drawing-room that evening at Holmes's behest. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the room and the faces within. Reginald Blackthorn slouched in an armchair, swirling a fresh glass of brandy with practiced indifference. Albert Crow stood by the mantelpiece, arms crossed, his jaw tight with barely concealed irritation. Lady Evelyn sat apart, her posture composed, but her eyes betraying the storm within. Clara Fenwick lingered near the doorway, her hands wringing, the hem of her dress, guilt and resolve warring on her face. Holmes addressed them, his tone cool and measured. "You've all been affected by the disturbances. Voices in the dark, shifting objects, inexplicable phenomena. Superstition and fear have clouded reason, but fear is often the product of manipulation. Tonight, we draw back the curtain." Reginald scoffed. "More theatrics, Holmes? I'm growing tired of this charade." Holmes's gaze flicked to him. "And yet, Lord Blackthorn, you remain. Curious for someone so dismissive." Reginald's smirk faltered, but he said nothing. Holmes continued. "Certain truths have come to light. Experiments conducted by the late patriarch of this family, experiments that crossed moral boundaries in pursuit of control over human memory. Miss Fenwick's brother was a casualty of that ambition." Lady Evelyn gasped, turning to Clara. "Why didn't you tell me?" "What difference would it have made?" Clara's voice cracked. "Your family's sins are carved into these walls," Crow interjected. "We're discussing events buried decades ago. What relevance does this have now?" Holmes's smile was thin. "Relevance, Mr. Crow. Someone has gone to great lengths to resurrect those buried truths, using the manor's acoustics, the tunnels beneath, and devices capable of projecting sound to foster fear. The question is, who benefits?" Reginald's grip on his glass tightened. "And you think it's me?" Holmes's gaze sharpened. "You stand to gain from the sale of the manor, as does Mr. Crow. Fear lowers value. Desperation accelerates decisions. But there's more. These manipulations require access, knowledge of the estate's history and its secrets." A tense silence followed. Then, as if on cue, the manor shuddered. A hollow voice echoed through the room, disembodied, chilling. "Leave, before it's too late." Lady Evelyn's face paled. Clara covered her ears, trembling. Reginald stood, brandy spilling. "What the devil?" Holmes remained calm. "Patience," another voice, different this time, male and mocking. "The past remembers, and it judges." Watson felt the hair on his neck stand. "Holmes." "A moment, Watson." Holmes stepped toward the wall, fingertips grazing the paneling. "Voices, without bodies. Yet." His hand found a small indentation. With a press, a concealed door creaked open, revealing a narrow corridor beyond. Crow's face drained of color. "That wasn't there before." "On the contrary," Holmes said, "it's always been here, hidden, like the truth." He motioned for Watson to follow. Lanterns lit, they ventured into the passage. The corridor sloped downward, stone walls closing in. The air was thick with dust and the lingering scent of old wood and decay. Faint sounds echoed, scraping, shifting. Watson whispered, "Holmes, are we walking into a trap?" "Undoubtedly," Holmes replied, "but knowledge often requires risk." At the passage's end, they emerged into a hidden chamber. The room was crude, lined with shelves containing aged equipment, wires, metal contraptions, and a large speaker-like device pointed upward. Holmes examined it, lips pursed. "Ingenious," he murmured. Sound projected through the walls, manipulated by these tunnels. Watson knelt beside a set of footprints in the dust. "Someone's been here recently." "Indeed," Holmes said. "And they're likely close." A sudden clang echoed behind them, then darkness as their lanterns extinguished. Holmes's voice cut through the blackness, calm yet commanding. "Stay still, Watson." Footsteps approached, slow, deliberate. Then a voice, familiar. "Well played, Holmes, but you've ventured too far." The lanterns flared to life, revealing Reginald standing in the doorway, revolver in hand, his face twisted with something between rage and desperation. Holmes's gaze was steady. "I suspected as much." Reginald's hand shook. "You think you know everything? This manor, it's a prison. Years spent in its shadow, watching my family rot from the inside out. Father's madness, Evelyn's naivety. It was all decay. Selling was the only way to salvage something. By terrifying your sister into submission?" Holmes's voice was cold. "Hiring someone to stage these hauntings?" Reginald's laugh was bitter. "Not hired, persuaded. Crow had contacts, people who knew how to create illusions. Fear's a powerful motivator." Holmes glanced at Watson. "And the inheritance? A tidy sum for you once Evelyn relinquished ownership." Reginald's eyes flashed. It wasn't just about money, it was freedom. From this cursed place, from the weight of history. His hand steadied, gun aimed squarely at Holmes. "But you had to dig, had to pry." Holmes's gaze didn't waver. "You won't shoot." "Won't I?" A tense beat, then a voice from the corridor. "Reginald! Don't!" Lady Evelyn appeared, her expression stricken. "This isn't you," Reginald faltered. "You don't understand?" "I do," she said softly. "But there's no redemption in this." Holmes stepped forward. "You sought to erase the past with fear, Lord Blackthorn. But the past has a habit of lingering." Reginald's shoulders sagged. The revolver clattered to the floor. Later, as the constables led Reginald away, Watson exhaled heavily. "I thought he'd—" "So did he," Holmes said. "Desperation blinds reason." Clara approached, eyes downcast. "I never wanted it to end like this." "Few do," Holmes replied. "But truth, Miss Fenwick, is indifferent to desire." As dawn broke over Blackthorn Manor, its fog began to lift, revealing the battered but enduring structure beneath. Secrets had surfaced, lives had unraveled, but clarity, like the morning light, had at last pierced the darkness. Chapter 5. The morning light crept cautiously over Blackthorn Manor, casting long, thin shadows that seemed reluctant to loosen their grip on the estate. Yet, despite the unfolding revelations of the night, Holmes's gaze remained distant, his mind immersed in a deeper labyrinth of thought. Reginald's confession had laid bare one layer of the mystery, but Holmes knew better. Truth, particularly in matters woven with such intricacy, rarely revealed itself so easily. There was still a thread, taut and unseen, pulling at the heart of the enigma. Watson found him in the drawing-room, seated in an armchair, fingers steepled and eyes fixed on the fireplace, though he seemed to look through it rather than at it. "You're unsettled," Watson observed, lowering himself into the opposite chair. "Indeed," Holmes murmured. Reginald's scheme was crude, driven by desperation. Effective in creating fear, yes, but Not sophisticated enough to account for everything. You think someone else is involved? Holmes's gaze sharpened. I know it. There are inconsistencies, details that do not align with Reginald's confession. The sound devices, the secret tunnels. He admitted to enlisting Crow's contacts, but certain elements, particularly the manipulation of Evelyn's personal memories, require intimate knowledge not just of the manor, but of the family itself. Watson frowned. Then who? A sharp knock interrupted them. Lady Evelyn entered, her face pale but composed. "Mr. Holmes," she began, "there's something I didn't tell you." Her gaze drifted to Watson, hesitating. "Please," Holmes gestured, "time is of the essence." "It's about the West Wing," she said softly. "After my father's death, I found letters, correspondence between him and Clara's family." Watson sat forward. "You knew of the experiments?" "I suspected," Evelyn admitted. "I tried to put it behind me, to preserve what dignity this house had left. Clara came to us as a governess, and I thought, perhaps, if I offered her a place here, it might ease the past." She paused. "But lately, I've noticed things. Belongings moved, old documents missing. I wanted to believe it was the staff, or my imagination." Holmes's jaw tightened. "Miss Fenwick's motives run deeper than we assumed." At that moment, Crow burst into the room, breathless. "Miss Fenwick, she's gone. Her room's empty." "No one's seen her since dawn." Holmes shot to his feet. "Then we must act quickly. Where's the entrance to the cellars?" Evelyn's eyes widened. "The old cellars? They've been sealed for years." "Not well enough," Holmes cut in. "She's forcing a confrontation. We follow." They descended swiftly into the manor's depths, the stone steps slick with moisture. The air thickened with the scent of earth and rot, lanterns casting jittery pools of light ahead. At the base of the stairs lay a rusted iron door, slightly ajar. Holmes pushed it open. The cellars stretched before them, a maze of brick arches and crumbling walls. Watson's voice dropped to a murmur. "Feels like walking into a tomb." "In a way, we are," Holmes replied. Deeper within, the air grew colder. Faint sounds echoed. Soft, almost musical whispers that seemed to come from every direction. It was disorienting, like standing at the center of 1,000 murmured conversations. Then they saw her. Clara stood before an ancient stone altar, her silhouette outlined by the flickering lantern she had set beside her. Her expression was calm, too calm, as if she had made peace with whatever decision she had reached. "You shouldn't have come," she said without turning. "This was never meant for you." Holmes's voice was measured. "Yet you knew we would." "What is this place, Miss Fenwick?" Her gaze drifted over the stones. "It's where it all started. Before the manor was built, this land was used for other purposes. My brother was brought here. So many were. They experimented, erased memories, played with lives like pieces on a board." Watson's heart twisted at the pain in her voice. "We understand your anger." "No," Clara interrupted sharply. "You don't. You can't. They took him from me. Not just his life, but him, who he was. And they acted like it was nothing." Her eyes shimmered with tears. "So I decided to make them remember." Holmes's gaze remained steady. "Reginald's scheme was one thing, but you orchestrated far more. The voices, the manipulated echoes. This isn't just about fear, it's about guilt." Clara nodded. "They needed to feel what I felt. The confusion, the terror. To hear voices they couldn't place. memories they didn't recognize. Her fingers traced the altar's edge. I found my father's notes. I refined the technology. The manor's construction, thick walls, hollow passages. It was perfect for sound manipulation. Watson shook his head. And Evelyn? She tried to help you. Help me? Clara's laugh was hollow. By offering pity? By hiding the truth? Her gaze softened, then hardened again. No. This house is a graveyard of secrets. It needed to speak. Holmes stepped closer. And what now? Reginald's exposed, Crow implicated. You've achieved your vengeance. Clara's smile was bitter. Have I? My brother's still gone. The others who suffered, forgotten. Nothing changes. That, Holmes paused, then spoke softly. Revenge is a hollow victory, Miss Fenwick. You sought justice, but what you've built here is a monument to grief. And grief cannot be exorcised by echoing pain onto others. Her eyes closed. For a long moment, silence reigned, save for the soft, persistent whispers weaving through the stones. Then she sighed. I thought, if they felt it, really felt it, maybe I'd find peace. And do you? Watson asked gently. Her silence was answer enough. Holmes extended a hand. Come. There's still a choice to be made. Slowly, she took it. Above, dawn had fully broken, pale light piercing the manor's windows. As constables led Clara away, Evelyn approached Holmes, eyes filled with sorrow. I never imagined it ran this deep. Holmes's voice was quiet. Secrets rarely stay buried, Lady Evelyn. They have a way of clawing back to the surface. Watson watched Clara disappear into the carriage. Do you think she'll find peace? Holmes's gaze lingered on the horizon. Perhaps. Or perhaps some echoes never fade. As they gathered their belongings, Watson glanced back at the manor, its facade weathered, yet somehow lighter, as if the weight of hidden truths had finally been lifted. Outside, the wind stirred. The trees rustled, and faint, barely audible, a single lingering whisper seemed to drift through the air. Remember. Chapter 6. The fog had lifted from Blackthorn Manor, leaving behind a cold clarity that settled over the estate like a blanket of finality. Sunlight, pale and thin, seeped through the tall windows, casting light on halls that had long known only darkness. The walls, once echoing with fabricated voices and the weight of secrets, now stood silent, as if exhausted from the confessions they had borne witness to. Holmes stood by the front entrance, gazing out at the winding driveway where the constable's snipers. Carriage disappeared down the gravel path, Clara Fenwick seated within. His features, as ever, were composed, but Watson recognized the contemplative shadow in his friend's eyes, the gaze of a man reviewing every detail, every thread pulled and untangled. She was never the villain in her own mind, Watson said softly, breaking the silence. Holmes nodded. Few people are, Watson. Motive is seldom born of simple malice. Hers was a tragedy twisted into resolve. Misguided, yes, but rooted in grief. He paused, his gaze distant. Grief, when untended, becomes its own echo. Persistent, inescapable. Watson sighed. Do you believe justice was served? Holmes considered this for a long moment. Justice is a concept men wield when truth proves too complex for comfort. Clara forced them all to confront what they tried to forget. Reginald's greed, Crow's complicity, Evelyn's silence. In exposing them, she held a mirror to their souls. He paused. whether that is justice or vengeance dressed in its clothing, is for history to decide. Inside, Lady Evelyn emerged from the drawing-room. Her posture remained composed, but her face bore the lines of weariness that truth often brings. "Mr. Holmes," she began, "I don't know how to thank you." "You needn't," Holmes replied. "Truth was the inevitable outcome. I merely expedited its arrival." She glanced down. "I never intended to bury what happened. I thought perhaps silence was the kinder choice." "Silence is rarely kind," Holmes said gently. "It spares no one, least of all those who wield it." Evelyn's gaze lifted to the manor's grand staircase. "I've lived my life trying to preserve this house, this family's name. And yet, perhaps it's the memories I was protecting, not the people. My father's ambition, Reginald's bitterness, Clara's pain. This place is steeped in all of it." Holmes's gaze followed hers. "Buildings are repositories of memory, Lady Blackthorn, but it's the people within who choose whether those memories are burdens or lessons." A faint, wry smile touched her lips. "I thought myself prepared to face the past. Turns out, the past is rarely content to stay still." She hesitated. "What would you do, Mr. Holmes, if this were your family's legacy?" Holmes was quiet for a beat too long. When he spoke, his voice was distant. "Legacies are weights we inherit, Lady Evelyn. The choice is whether to carry them or set them down." Watson watched the exchange, sensing layers of thought unspoken between them. "What will you do? With the manor?" he asked. Evelyn sighed. "I don't know. Sell it, perhaps, or tear it down. Part of me wonders if the land itself might breathe easier without these walls." Holmes tilted his head. "Demolition erases stone, not memory." "That belongs to you." A clock somewhere within the house chimed the hour. Time, relentless and indifferent, marched on. Watson, ever pragmatic, broke the looming silence. "Train leaves within the hour, Holmes." Holmes nodded but lingered, taking one last look at the manor's façade, the crumbling stone, the weathered carvings above the entrance. Blackthorn Manor, a monument to ambition, grief, and the human propensity to forget what should be remembered, and remember what one longs to forget. As they gathered their belongings, Holmes paused beside a portrait in the hall. The painted eyes of the elder Lord Blackthorn stared down at him, features stern and proud. Holmes's gaze was unreadable. "Men build houses," he murmured, "but their sins furnish them." Outside, the carriage awaited. Evelyn stood at the doorway, the weight of the past pressing upon her shoulders, though perhaps a fraction lighter now. "Thank you," she said again, softer this time. Holmes offered a nod. "May you find peace, Lady Evelyn. Or at the very least, quiet." They departed down the gravel path, the manor receding behind them. Watson glanced back once, half expecting to see a figure at the window, a shadow lingering in farewell. There was none, only empty glass reflecting the morning sky. On the train ride back to London, Watson turned to his friend. "Do you think she'll recover?" Holmes considered. "People endure, Watson. Not always gracefully, but they endure. Evelyn has faced her ghosts. Whether she banishes them or invites them to stay is her choice." Watson leaned back in his seat. "It's strange, isn't it? How places can hold on to things long after people forget." Holmes's gaze remained fixed on the passing landscape. "Places remember because people need them to. We project our guilt, our grief, our joys onto walls and streets, hoping something will bear witness. Blackthorn Manor was a vessel, filled to brimming. Clara simply uncorked it. A thoughtful silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the rhythmic clatter of wheels on tracks. Finally, Watson asked, "And you? Do you believe in echoes, Holmes? The kind that linger beyond reason?" Holmes's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "Reason is a framework, Watson, not a prison. There are echoes in this world, some heard, some felt, some best left unanswered." As London's skyline crept into view, the city's familiar fog rolling to greet them, Holmes closed his eyes for a moment. Watson watched him, sensing the case's weight already receding into the archive of his remarkable mind. Another solved puzzle, another chapter closed. And yet, as they stepped onto the platform, Holmes glanced back toward the direction they'd come from, as if listening for something just out of earshot. Watson, noticing, asked, "What is it?" Holmes shook his head. "Nothing, my dear Watson. Or perhaps everything." They moved forward, footsteps echoing in the bustling station. Behind them, far beyond the horizon and the fog, Blackthorn Manor stood quiet at last, its secrets unearthed, its echoes, for now, at rest. And yet, if one stood in its empty halls, beneath the dust and silence, they might still hear it, a faint whisper. Remember. The London fog wrapped around Holmes and Watson as they stepped off the train, swirling through the station in lazy coils. The bustle of the city provided a stark contrast to the brooding stillness of Blackthorn Manor. Carriages clattered along the cobblestones, voices echoed off brick walls, and the familiar hum of life pressed in from all sides. Yet, despite the return to normalcy, the case lingered between them like a shadow refusing to be outrun. Holmes walked briskly, his coat billowing behind him, boots tapping out a steady rhythm on the pavement. Watson kept pace, the chill biting through his sleeves. The streets passed in a blur of gaslights and blurred faces until Baker Street loomed ahead, familiar and reassuring. Mrs. Hudson greeted them at the door with a warm smile and a worried glance. "Back in one piece, I see," she remarked. "I've kept your tea warm." Holmes offered a rare smile. "Much appreciated, Mrs. Hudson." Inside, the sitting room welcomed them with its cluttered comfort. Papers strewn across tables, chemical apparatuses half abandoned, and the faint lingering scent of tobacco. Holmes shed his coat, collapsed into his armchair, and lit his pipe, the tendrils of smoke curling upward to join the haze already staining the ceiling. Watson poured 2 cups of tea, settling opposite him. "Still turning it over, I see." Holmes exhaled slowly, gaze distant. "There are cases, Watson, that resolve with neatness, motives uncovered, culprits apprehended, and justice served with clean lines." He paused, eyes narrowing. "And then there are those that unravel like threads from an old tapestry. Pull one, and the whole fabric loosens, revealing patterns best left obscured." Watson stirred his tea thoughtfully. "You mean Clara?" Holmes nodded. "Her intentions, misguided though they were, stemmed from something primal. Grief is not a puzzle one solves, Watson. It is a weight one learns to bear. Or not." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft ticking of the clock on the mantel. Watson sipped his tea, warmth spreading through him even as the chill of the manor's memories clung to his bones. "Do you think she'll find peace?" Holmes's lips twisted into something between a smile and a grimace. Peace is a luxury afforded to few, my friend. For her, perhaps acknowledgment will suffice. Watson leaned back, gaze drifting to the window where the fog thickened beyond the glass. I keep thinking about those voices, the echoes, not just the ones she manufactured, but the real ones, the ones in the walls, the memories buried in that place. He paused. Do you believe places can remember, Holmes? Holmes's gaze sharpened. Places are made of people, Watson. Their fears, their hopes, their sins seep into the foundations. The manor was no exception. It stood too long absorbing the guilt of those who lived within its walls. Clara merely gave voice to what was already there. Watson shook his head. It's unsettling. Holmes's pipe smoke curled upward, joining the fog pressing against the window. The world is unsettling, Watson. That is its nature. Our task is not to find comfort in it, but clarity. The room fell into contemplative quiet, the weight of the case settling like dust over old books. Watson thought of Lady Evelyn, standing in the ruins of her family's legacy, of Reginald, his ambition curdled into bitterness, of Clara, eyes burning with sorrow and resolve, each haunted by the past, by choices that echoed louder than any manufactured sound. Do you ever wonder, Watson ventured after a while, if we do more harm than good? Uncovering these truths, sometimes I think ignorance might be kinder. Holmes's gaze flicked to him, sharp and unwavering. Ignorance is a temporary salve, Watson. Truth endures. It waits, patient and unyielding. Better to confront it than let it fester. Outside, the city moved on, unaware, uncaring. Life churned forward, as it always did. Yet, for those touched by the shadows of Blackthorn Manor, the past would not be so easily shaken. Watson finished his tea, setting the cup aside. What now? Holmes's eyes closed, head resting against the back of his chair. Now, we wait. Another letter will arrive. Another case. The world is generous in its supply of mysteries. Watson chuckled softly. And you'd be lost without them. Holmes's lips curved into a faint smile. Perhaps. The fire crackled softly, casting flickering warmth into the room. Beyond the window, the fog thickened, swallowing the world in its gray embrace. Yet inside, amid the clutter and the quiet, there was a strange sense of peace, fleeting, but real. And as Watson's eyes began to drift closed, lulled by warmth and exhaustion, Holmes's voice broke the stillness one last time. Do you hear it, Watson? Hear what? Holmes's gaze was fixed on the window, on the swirling fog beyond. The world, my dear Watson. It never truly goes silent. And somewhere, far away, or perhaps far too close, a single, fleeting whisper seemed to drift through the air. Remember. But whether it was the echo of the past, or merely the imagination's final trick, neither man could say. The days passed, yet the case of Blackthorn Manor lingered like a stubborn shadow on Watson's mind. Even amidst London's ceaseless hum, the clatter of carriages, the shouts of vendors, the distant peal of bells, he found himself pulled back to the chilling stillness of that estate, to the cold weight of the walls that seemed to breathe secrets. Holmes, ever the master of compartmentalization, had thrown himself into new pursuits. Chemistry experiments, violin improvisations, and, of course, the morning newspapers, which he dissected with surgical precision. But Watson could not shake the memories. the way the manor had seemed to listen. The voices, both fabricated and perhaps not, that had wormed their way into his thoughts, surfacing in quiet moments. He found himself glancing over his shoulder more than once in the streets, half expecting a familiar whisper to curl around his ear. It was on a gray morning, thick with drizzle, that another letter arrived. Mrs. Hudson, bustling in with the post, handed it to Holmes without ceremony. "Another case?" she asked. Holmes hummed noncommittally and slit the envelope open with a practiced flick of his letter opener. Watson, watching from his armchair, sipped his tea. More ghosts in old houses? Holmes's eyes scanned the page, lips pressing into a thin line. "Not quite?" He held the letter aloft. The handwriting was elegant but urgent. Watson recognized the name at once. Lady Evelyn Blackthorn. "Mr. Holmes, I write to you with hesitation, for I fear you may consider me foolish. And yet, I cannot ignore what persists. Since your departure, the manor has changed, and not for the better. The voices have ceased, yes, but now there is something worse. A silence that feels heavier than the echoes ever did. Rooms colder than stone. Shadows that linger too long. I know how this sounds. I know what logic dictates. And yet, I implore you, come back. If only to tell me I am imagining it. To put my mind at ease. Yours, in trepidation, Evelyn Blackthorn." Watson frowned. Surely it's just nerves. After everything that transpired, anyone would feel the weight of that place. Holmes's gaze was distant. Perhaps. He folded the letter carefully, tapping it against his palm. And yet, what haunts the IDE mind can be as dangerous as any tangible threat. Watson leaned forward. "You're considering returning?" Holmes stood abruptly, fetching his coat. "We solved the puzzle, Watson. Unmasked the motives, exposed the guilty. But what if there was more? A deeper current we failed to trace?" He paused at the door. "Would you rather wonder or know?" Watson sighed, setting his teacup down with a clink. "You know I can't resist a mystery." "Good," Holmes said with a faint smile. "Then pack your bag." Blackthorn Manor awaited, draped in fog as though the land itself resisted clarity. The carriage wheels crunched over gravel, the familiar skeletal trees clawing at the sky. Watson felt the weight settle over him the moment the estate came into view. It was as if the place remembered them. Evelyn stood at the entrance, arms crossed against the chill. Her face bore the marks of sleepless nights, shadows beneath her eyes, lines etched deeper than before. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. Holmes inclined his head. "Describe what's been happening." Evelyn hesitated, then gestured. "Them inside." The air was colder than Watson recalled, the warmth from the hearth struggling against an oppressive chill. Paintings along the hall seemed more faded, their subjects' eyes dull with neglect. "It's hard to explain," Evelyn said, as they settled in the drawing room. "It's not the noises anymore. It's what comes after. Doors that won't stay open, mirrors that seem to reflect rooms as they once were, not as they are now. And the silence." She shivered. "It's thick, like walking through molasses. And the staff, they've begun to refuse night shifts." Holmes steepled his fingers, gaze distant. "And yourself? Have you experienced anything personal?" Evelyn swallowed. "I see. My father. In dreams. Sometimes standing at the end of the hall when I wake. But I tell myself it's grief. Guilt. Your words echo in my mind. Grief becomes its own echo. I want to believe that's all it is. Her voice dropped. But I'm not so sure. Watson exchanged a glance with Holmes. Residual fear, he offered. After so much manipulation, it's natural your mind plays tricks. Perhaps, Evelyn murmured, but minds aren't the only things that remember. Holmes stood abruptly. Take me to the West Wing. Her hesitation was palpable, but she nodded, leading them up the grand staircase. The halls stretched, long and empty, every footstep sounding louder than it should. They reached the sealed section, the lock still broken from their previous visit. Evelyn pushed the door open. The air beyond was different, heavier. Watson felt it like a pressure against his chest. The rooms lay in disarray, sheets draped over furniture, dust thick in the air, yet disturbed. Patterns on the floor suggested movement. Not recent, but not ancient either. Holmes's gaze swept the space, sharp as a blade. Someone's been here. Since Clara's arrest? Watson asked. Holmes nodded. Perhaps before, perhaps after. His fingers brushed against a bookshelf. One of the volumes was newer, its spine less cracked. He pulled it free. Hollow. Inside lay a folded paper, brittle with age. Unfolding it revealed a map of the manor, but older. Alterations noted in faded ink, tunnels, secret passages beyond those they had found. Of course, Holmes murmured. Clara found some, but not all. Evelyn's voice was barely a whisper. There's more? Holmes's gaze never left the map. There's always more. They followed the indicated route, descending into yet another cellar. Watson's pulse quickened. The air here was different. Colder, yes, but wrong. Like standing at the edge of something not meant to be disturbed. The passage led to a bricked-up wall. Holmes examined it, found the weak point, and with effort, dislodged the bricks. Beyond lay a chamber untouched by time. Shelves lined with jars containing... Watson turned away, stomach churning. Preserved specimens, notes scribbled with increasingly unhinged handwriting. It's worse than experiments, Holmes said grimly. Obsession. Evelyn's hand covered her mouth. My father? I thought I knew the extent. Holmes's gaze was hard. He sought to trap memories, not just record them, to preserve consciousness. These weren't just experiments in sound or suggestion. He was trying to imprint identity into the very structure of the house. Watson's skin crawled. You mean? Holmes nodded. The manor doesn't echo by accident. It was designed to hold voices, thoughts, fragments of those who lived and died here. Evelyn backed away. He wanted to live forever through these walls. And perhaps, Holmes said quietly, he succeeded. Silence fell heavy and absolute. Then, from nowhere, everywhere, a voice. Hollow. Familiar. You shouldn't have come back. Watson froze. Evelyn's eyes widened in terror. Holmes's jaw tightened. Watson, he said softly, remind me to despise being correct. The manor had remembered, and some echoes, it seemed, refused to fade.